many organizations and networks, including the Finnish Weekload network, and what is written there on the program Vasudhara Kutumbakam network. And actually the set of presentations we have today, this is the most recent step in collaboration between some Finnish activists and organizations and Indian activists in organization, where we have been for more than 10 years been in search of a sort of the alternative perspective that would take us further away from this present very inegalitarian and destructive system, which I call fossil capitalism, according to Elma Altsvata, and then move on to the good society. So today our title is post-growth society, but we will not be spending time on defining the post-growth society in a way. I think over the 3 days we have been hearing very nicely that how we would like the society to be established to overcome the problems and shortcomings and disasters of the present system. So we'll try to run the 7 presentations quite fast, so that we'll be having time for discussions and questions. And very great thanks for the ad hoc German translation, so that everybody will hear where we are and what we have. Okay. So I start myself by giving something which again comes out of the research and dialogue program that I conducted together with many friends here from India, called Sustainable Cultures, to provide some kind of perspective that there are different pathways, that it's not conceivable that there will be one way for the post-growth society, but the pathways will be a bit different for different circumstances. And this is the kind of framework that we developed based on 2 criteria. That first of all, that people in the world, 7 billion of us, are living in a very different realities, and on social so in a way, in the social set, we divided the people into 2 groups: those whose basic needs are met and those whose are not. Very rough, but in this case hopefully useful. And secondly, taking the environment seriously, taking the environmental sustainability seriously, and then again doing some rough but useful categorization. That we took this idea that economic activity measured in form of income relates very directly or very strongly or strongly enough with the environmental damage that different lifestyles cause. And this is surprisingly little discussed, although there's very strong evidence. I'm not showing it here, but if we look at the countries of the world, so with the high income, it's always high ecological footprint. And if we look at any household survey, high income households, high ecological footprint, and low income, low ecological footprint. So then, based on these 2 criteria, we came up with this idea of 4 different classes, or we could call it income group or consumption groups globally. And then with some quite crude data crunching, we came up with these very exact figures that how many there are in the world. So if we start from the really over-consuming with just basically it includes all EU and all OECD countries, and then about the same number from various developing countries with sort of normal income, like and when we know it, if we look at our per capita carbon dioxide emissions, it's on the way up and above a sustainable limit. And then we have this, somehow consuming, but not so consuming, but the kind of which I think is empowering idea, is that we have 3 billion people around the world who have their basic needs met, but their consumption level is not in a destructive one. And then we have the struggling class, the 2 billion that go hungry and are facing a lot of difficulties. And now to the main point, that what is the transformation scenario, what is the, like, how to get there to the post-growth society. So in here we sort of prescribe degrowth for the 2 billion richest of the world, and then immediate and thorough empowerment for the 2 billion poorest, but then for the 3 billion in the middle, sort of continuity. Of course, not everything as it is, but on a material scale. And also because often we have this idea that everybody has to change, everything has to change. So the point here is that, well, for some the change will not be so big. So this is the perspective I had in mind. And I think unless there's some really immediate questions, we just take all the seven very different presentations in a row. But that's just something in mind.
I just felt that the way of doing it with incomes is problematic. So quite a few of those below 750 USD may actually be living in situations where they're doing pretty well. Their forests are still intact or their seas are still intact. And the problem with them saying we need some, I don't know what you mean by empowerment there, but if we need some inputs there, is that it gives an excuse for the governments to go in and say, well, you guys need development because you're in a struggling situation because you're below a certain income level. I think if you could build that into the equation, it might make it a bit more nuanced.
Okay, thanks for the very good comment. Okay, so I think we move on, and the next speaker, or
I just had another comment maybe, because I think, well, what you've been showing is a classification of people living in the world according to incomes, but it never really puts into question the whole systematic of capitalist exploitation itself. And no matter how equal we will distribute the wealth on earth, there will still be exploitation of people's labor and of natural resources. And actually in the panel that we had yesterday in the morning, we were coming to a conclusion, or a sort of conclusion, that maybe the degrowth movement should incorporate anti-capitalist stances much more than it can. And especially coming from, well, or especially if we want to incorporate perspectives from the globe itself a bit more. Because, of course, from the perspective of the globe itself, it's much more important actually to really go to the root of what is the problem of capitalist production and consumption. And I think the problem is much deeper than things statistics show.
yeah, I fully agree. Did everybody hear? Yes, yeah. I fully agree, and maybe this can be sort of passed on to the next speakers, because of course, like, to have degrowth, we have to undo capitalist structures, and also to have empowerment, it has to be done. So this was just sort of visualization where the changes would happen, and also then for the, I think, for the degrowth debates and degrowth movements, I'm sort of hoping this be useful. That where is it that degrowth should immediately happen, and that would be coming to high income, which are the ones who have also the political power and who sort of maintain and benefit most from the best credit system. So I think that this transformational revolution is certainly part of the agenda. But here I just gave these hints from the work. Okay, so we move on to next presentation. Rajni Bakshi, welcome. Rajni is from Mumbai, India, working now as a fellow, Gandhi Peace Fellow at the think tank called Gateway House, and she has been very important writer for the movements. He has been documenting and publishing a lot of movements, and a few years back wrote an important book, Bazaars and Markets. So markets, you can tell the full name, and it's even for sale. I saw some copies over there. So then there's a chance to get to know what's his thinking even more than in the next 5-7 minutes.
5 minutes. Great. Thank you, Marco. And really lovely to be here. It's been a lovely time deep inside the comfort zone. So I just wanted to share that with all of you, that it's been a total delight to be here. So the conversation of the book that Marco just referred to is Bazaars, Conversations and Freedom. And I think I'll use my 5-6 minutes to try to address this question from that perspective. Basically, the title of the book, it's a longer or more elaborate form, is that bazaars are conversations about freedom. Not just the freedom to buy and sell, but the freedom firstly to meet, to gather as collectives and as individuals, and exchange firstly ideas, starting with perhaps the purpose of life. And the reason why I came to this title was that in the year 1999, I set out to ask a very basic question, I mean really a kind of kindergarten level question, that what is this market? And the question came to me for the following reason. I was involved in struggles for people's control, local people's control over their natural resources for about 20 years, from about 82, 83 onwards, both documenting them as a journalist and also trying to support in some small way. And by 1999 in India, a very diverse range of these activist groups and movements agreed on one thing. I mean, there were many different ideologies, many disagreements, but one thing people agreed on, that Jal, Jungle, Jameen, Logon ke haath, which means land, forest and water, must be in the hands of the local community. And I had been, shouting this slogan, writing along these lines for 15 years. And then in about 1998, it struck me that if the larger market system doesn't change, actually this slogan would not only be shallow and hollow, but it could actually land the very people we were trying to fight for in a much worse situation. Because if the larger system remains untouched, then it would be far easier for an Enron. That was the last big controversy many of us had been involved in. There was a company called Enron. And there was a resistance against a gas-based power plant that they were constructing. That if you don't have any change in the larger picture, it's far easier, far cheaper for an Enron just to buy 5 people at the village committee. How will we ensure that, who is this people, even at the village level? So, beyond a certain point, it's a myth. Unless there is in fact a community structure. And a community structure that has a notion of what is sustainability, etc., etc. And all that takes a lot of doing. So that's how I set out to study what is the market, and I came to 2-3 basic conclusions, which, since I have only 3 minutes left, one, that every society that ever moved beyond hunting and gathering has had a bazaar. Ever since our ancestors stopped somewhere to cultivate, we have had exchange in some form. But it's very interesting that some form or the other of reciprocal exchange precedes monetized or commodity exchange by 4,000 years. That is, to me, a fascinating detail. It takes 4,000 years of settled agriculture before the first commodity exchange comes into the picture. And even then, it exists side by side with gift exchange for another 3,500 years. The first fixed shops appear in Greece and in India, perhaps even in China, around the same time, roughly between 600 and 700 BC. That's around the same time that the first forms of money, as in coin money, appear. I mean, there's other forms of exchange. I mean, tokens of exchange before that. So to cut a long story short, my basic submission is that we need to make a distinction between commerce and capitalism. Commerce is very ancient, and in the Indian, and I would say from the Middle East to the China, we have the advantage that we are living in a tradition of unbroken commerce. In the West, after the collapse of the Roman Empire, your market systems collapsed completely, they vanished, because the economy shrank into the feudal manors and the monasteries. And then they were revived. Your very city here, Leipzig, is an example of one of the first places where the big market fairs began to be revived. I think here it's 11th century or something. So, basically my appeal is that we need to understand this history much better, not because there is any call to go backwards, but because if we understand the diversity of knowledge, wisdom and experience that we have in the past with different forms of exchange, how all of them, pretty much uninterrupted till about 1700, till about the time of Adam Smith, they are all embedded in social mores. There is no bazaar till the modern times that is not embedded in society, with society deciding its terms of reference, society deciding what are the norms within which it will operate. And the big difference between bazaar and market is that market is disembedded from society. Now I know that this gets me into a lot of trouble in some circles and people say this is a very arbitrary division, etc. So I'll ask you to bear with me on that. Basically the bazaar is what you and I can engage with even today in parts of rural India. It's spontaneous, it's organic, it is money related, it's not demonetized, but it is embedded in a social structure. And the market is what you and I can go and do just now. We can play on the, on Wall Street, buy and sell shares and everything that comes from it. And capitalism really is a creature of this modern market. And so that's basically my submission. I'd be happy to come back later during the Q&A. Or do you want to do Q&A now?
Yeah, if you can hang on. So any reactions on those distinctions? The book is on the first bookshop on the first floor.
Oh, that was a sly commercial.
I propose this week's for another 2 minutes on how to get there.
Okay.
What you have heard for last days here, linking with that.
Promoting bazaars.
Well, actually, what you have here, what we experienced here, I think for 3.5 days, is that very spirit which I historically find is intrinsic to why the bazaar happened. Humans have had a natural need to gather. And I think first of all we gathered for the sake of gathering, for festivity, for conversation, for gossip, for politics, all that made culture, that created society as we know it today with family and parenting and all the structures. They came out of our need to gather. And because we gathered, it became convenient to also buy and sell. So, we've not come here to buy books or to buy a cup of coffee. But because we are here for another purpose, we are also buying food, buying books, buying a tote bag. And basically, I think a lot of what I've seen and heard here is along those tracks. That whether it's the community currency discussion, which I hope Ruby will tell us about later, or it is the whole discussion today on different business models. I couldn't get into the room, it was overflowing. There was one session in the morning, I know there have been several, but the one that I tried to go to was packed that, really thrilled me. There was so much interest in various kinds of, they were called non-growth business models. I look forward to reading the papers later online. And close with just one example. When people say that, to help you distinguish what I mean by all commerce is not capitalism. In India, in every shop, in every town or city, we have examples of some manufacturer, single unit, maybe a family or even sometimes it's just a person. Usually it's a food item, but it need not always be. And every day or every week, he produces a fixed number of things, he or she. So, if his pastries or what we call mithai, it's a sweet. If it sells out by 12 noon, he shuts the shop and goes home. Now when you tell this story, I had a conversation with an executive from Pepsi recently, because you know, when you have an argument, you don't try to have a conversation with the corporates, they always say that, well, you know, there's nothing else. What do you mean, another way of doing things? So I gave him this example, and he said, but that person is ignorant and stupid. Because clearly, there's a demand for what he manufactures, but he chooses to make only so much, and he's not hiring 10 other people so that he can have 20 times more production, and he can sell it till midnight. I said, well, that's a model. Why can't you accept that this person prefers to operate this way? And one last example, and then I'll close, because this is still a bit abstract. There's a friend of mine who works at a rural, well, it's a kind of a semi-rural urban, but it's a very small town in Maharashtra. He works at a hospital. So the owner of that hospital does angioplasties, you know, that's a procedure for the heart when there's a blockage. He does it at 1/4 what it costs in Bombay. So one of the big cardio surgeons from Bombay called him and complained that you're spoiling the market. People are going from Bombay to your place to get this done. And he said, well, you know, actually the truth is that this is what my market has decided. I am doing the procedure at a price that my local market has determined for me. And where's the problem? Because I own 2 Mercedes-Benz. So if it's spoiling your market, and you know, there's nothing I'm going to do about that. And I'll finally close by a story that maybe you all heard about, Linus Torvalds, who created the Linux system. So you know, when he goes to America and he's so famous and everything, even in the mid-90s, one reporter interviews him and is very frustrated with this whole commie-sounding ideology. The poor Linus keeps saying he's not a communist. And he says, but what are you going against making money? And Linus says, nothing at all. I make enough to put gas in my BMW. And the rest is history. 90% of the internet is today operated by open source.
Any immediate questions, reactions to Rajni? If not, then we move on to, okay,
Just a question, Rajni. I think, I mean, I totally agree with you, so this is building on it. Traditional bazaars were fantastic, but they were also, at least to some extent, built on relations of inequality. So how do you propose that when we revive bazaars or bazaar-like processes, that the issue of inequities be dealt with?
Absolutely, that's a very central question, because particularly in India, most of our, I didn't go into all that, by the way, there wasn't time, but if you, I'm so sorry, my phone is I promise you this is not my phone. It's my niece's phone and I don't know how to change the quality. I have to go home and find out why she has that tune on it. Yeah, equity is a very big issue, because the bulk of the bazaar spaces in India were run on reciprocal or how to say ये जो हमारे यहाँ था जजमानी system को क्या कहें? There's no English for it, but anyway, they were caste based. Okay, caste in the sense that all trades were a caste group, and there were very intricate interrelationships. I'm going to leave it to Pawan Gupta to say more about this, because he is our expert on it. But Ashish, the answer to your question is that as long as that the reinforcement at the macro and micro level is constant, that we are working towards new systems of equity, then I think we can maybe learn and operate from some of the core principles that were there. We should be able to cull out the reciprocity and mutuality that was there in those systems, and yet create forms of equity and dignity that conform to our sensibility, 21st century sensibility. But there's a condition, and I'm sorry, this is a bit of an internal Indian discourse. We will have to have a more multi-dimensional understanding of caste. I'm sorry, the Marxist and the traditional left understanding of caste is inaccurate, it is wrong, and that also needs to be challenged. So we will have to look at caste with not the 24, at least when we are trying to analytically understand it, not with the current sensibility. And then, yes, we must work towards systems of equity that are completely rooted in current notions of what is, why when we say dignity for all, what do we mean? And it's tough, it's not going to be easy.
But there's no going back.
There's no going back. I keep saying that, yeah. There's only going forward. However, as in all times, there are, see, we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel philosophically. And so really when I say that we look more closely at the past, I mean it as a philosopher, not as a sociologist.
Okay, thank you so much. And now Ruby, she has been one of the co-founders of the Helsinki Time Bank, which has been really very flourishing, not only in terms of the exchanges happening there, but also introducing the whole concept of solidarity economy into Finnish movement debates. And so I think Ruby will tell a bit about the Time Bank experience and then expand on it, how it's one of the ways forward to our better post-growth society. Thanks.
Thank you. And yeah, I think it's good like this to continue from your talking of the bazaar and the issue of exchange being embedded in social relations, and then Ashish, you raised that, but what about equality? That's giving moving on from there, perhaps first one to be putting up front that is good when we start to talk about the time bank, so about the community currency that we put up front, so what then is economy, what is the paradigm change that want to be going through, which of course is of interest for degrowth. And in that sense, for the development of Helsinki Time Bank, the whole methodology and visioning of solidarity economy building has been really inspirational. Starting from the point that it puts up front that economy, demythicizing it, it's about nothing more or less than how do we organize life. And that's the discussion that is of everybody and for everybody. And then secondly, it points out, like has been said, and you were also saying, Rajni, that around us there are so many layers and activities, economic activities that are putting very fundamentally different values up front than profit. And that by making them more visible and linking them up more, we can in fact be taking back the economy and we can be coming to structural change. If wanting to then think about money, a lot of talk here at the conference is also about redistribution. There is actually less talk about the fact that what does the money system, like we have it, what does that do to our relations? And I'm not going to get into the fact about money creation and whether or not that fuels or not fuels growth, because in the General Assembly process group about money and finance, there's still no consensus about this, and it's day 2. Let's see what happens tonight. But I mean, the issue that indeed money as we know it now is creating relations based on competition and scarcity, it's good to then understand and start to believe that we can be creating currency which is fostering entirely different relations. So it is in this context that it is interesting to then look at the time bank. So we took it for granted in another session. I mean, a time bank is that people exchange services on the basis of time, and the core premise is that everybody's time, everybody's work, everybody's needs are of equal worth. So basically, if I'm in the time bank, I have my account, and from my account, I can be seeing what is it that other people need, and what is it that I need, and we can be exchanging services. And we do that against our time credit, which is called a tovi. A tovi in Finnish means a moment. And in this way, we have a time bank circle which goes around. Now the framework of solidarity economy building and the fact that you can be putting certain values up front has been inspirational then for the time bank to be coming to a value chart. We did a workshop with our members. This is also part of the process, these processes of deliberation, and we charted down what are the values that are important for us when other actors will be joining the time bank, and we made our ABC. And I mean, in that our values, of course, referring to ecology, referring to direct democracy, equity, And that became a frame of reference to be assessing when new actors want to join, how do we feel about that? And that are in itself very interesting moments of deliberation. We have membership meetings, and for instance, last weekend, a Steiner daycare joined us, a food cooperative has been joining us earlier, and so this framework has been developing our actions. Now, it's not to say that it's a blueprint, but it's giving guidance. So then you can look at these time credits as a currency, but currency as a commons, as has been referred to here a lot. And a lot of commenting around it, putting the rules together, that what are our rules shaping it, all that is part of the commenting around this currency commons, basically. And then it's interesting to see, because you were talking of actors which are in the market, but is that necessarily only capitalism? It's interesting to think of the example of a food cooperative. Let's call it a solidarity economy actor, an ethical food cooperative. It is in the market. However, interacting with the time bank, if people can work for the cooperative, get time credits, and with the time credits also get the ethical food, food is becoming more of a commons. And that is also the alliances that, for instance, in the morning, perhaps if you were listening to Michel Bouwens talking about the alliance between solidarity economy actors and the commons, and be able to transcend and go beyond market. So then we are able to work towards paradigm change. So we are 5 years old, soon, young, of course. A lot of people have joined, meaning registered, in the last 2 years. That means they have signed on to our chart. So a bit more than 3,000 people have registered, but only less than a third, about 1,000 people have once or more exchanged. In total, some 20,000 hours have been exchanged in these 5 years, including also work done for the time bank, because this is not a project, there's no funding. That has also been an issue of choice. The idea is that work done for the time bank is also remunerated in the time currency, so to strengthen that whole process. Now, I mean, worldwide there are thousands and thousands of time banks, but the way you use it, the way you use this tool, which it is, really matters, the way it is defined. I mean, time banks are big in Great Britain. They have been quite typically, they define themselves a lot as charities, are part of a bit of a big society discussion in which the public is being grappled down, and then we have time banks where citizens can be taking care of each other. The place there where nobody can make any profit anymore, let us have time banks. Today they're not considered that innovative anymore, so they don't get that innovation money anymore, but they will be increasingly incorporated in corporate responsibility papers. So that is just, interesting to be aware of. In Holland you have another solution. There's a sort of a plateau. You have the time credit is being equated with 5-6 euros, I believe, until a certain level of time credits. You don't have to open the books with regards to showing that you haven't been doing any professional work in the time bank. Now, perhaps that allows the time bank to be growing, but it doesn't mean you cannot publicly, openly talk about the transformative potential that the time bank could have. In Scandinavia, it has been hard to have time banks because there's, of course, a very large tax income base of the welfare state. So Sweden, Denmark, it has been hardly impossible to have time banks. Now in Finland, we got tax guidelines last year, and unfortunately, or scope for potential for further dialogue, but well, their conclusion was that all skilled work done in the time bank is meant to be euro taxed. So it means if I receive services done in the time bank, supposedly according to market value, although the services are not in the market, but I should be paying taxes. This has of course caused a lot of confusion and a lot of worries, and it has influenced definitely the amount of exchanges that are being done. But we also want to address this issue, and I mean we want to call for a time of assessment But also importantly, we want to talk about the idea of a time tax, which can also be interesting when thinking about degrowth. We have already an internal time tax working. So whenever I do an exchange and I get a time credit, a very small percentage, I've crossed out to which economic actor in the time bank my tax goes. In my case, it goes to the ethical food cooperative. And so other members have their time tax destination. What we would want to have or hope to have would be a dialogue, for instance, with our city, with Helsinki City, in which we would want to explore, is there in this idea further scope for, I mean, the main point, of course, would be autonomy. The idea is that in the time bank and its values, that you can autonomously grow and deal. But of course, it could be so that there can be similar objectives of a city and of a time bank, and can the option of a time tax become a viable alternative? So this is something we want to explore. And of course, that has all kinds of implications. It's not only saying euro time tax, it also has to deal with the public sphere, with opening up scope for citizens to be more directly engaged in the public, and as such, instead of privatizing, talking of a commodifying of the public.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, immediate comment.
I would just like to go over the numbers you mentioned. As I understand it, 3,000 people registered, 1,000 actually participate. In 5 years, 20,000 hours. So that works out to, on average, per participating member, 4 hours per year. Is that right?
Wait, I haven't even made a. Yeah, see, there's less than a third has once or more made an exchange.
Right.
So we're talking small.
Okay, so about 1,000 people.
20 hours per person.
20 hours, but that's over a 5-year period. So that's 4 hours per year. That's 4 hours per year.
Well, but they were not all there. We
I
started.
understand, but just on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So yeah.
It's not overtaking the market yet.
Did I say so?
No, just on a certain perspective. Thank you.
For scale, just as an example of scale,
Well,
Japan.
Yeah, no. I mean, there are very big time bank principles.
Isn't it created in Japan?
Yes. But I want to add then also something. In Japan, it has been very big, the Furaikipai system, in which basically people can earn time credits when taking care also of elderly people. And it has been a very successful system in itself in achieving that objective. But it also raises a lot of questions in the sense that, for instance, is it then so that a certain segment of a society will be taking care of others? Is that so? Is this kind of, in how far is there an engineering going on there? What is the role of the state? In how far are we? So myself, I find it interesting to look at it from a geographical and promote all kind of interactions between people. But indeed, it has been, the time banking system has been used in different ways.
Thanks a lot. And then our next speaker is Leena Gupta from Gujarat and Delhi, and she will present us a case, quite sad, about the way development destroys livelihoods. And the takeaway message, I guess, there is that, if we want to move on to the post-growth society, then at least we should do is to prevent the immediate destruction caused by development. And we're used to hear about the big dams and big mines and all this, sort of immediately we know that this is not the right thing. But this case is about windmills, and windmills that has been certified for this so-called carbon credits in the clean development mechanism of the climate convention. So, like in Europe, we have now this debate that we go for Energiewende, and the windmills are beautiful and great. But then when it happens, German company in India, it's not that nice. Actually, the opposite. So, Leena.
Yeah, this case is about
Kalpavali, and a community conserved area. And Kalpavali, this area, has experience of two kinds of different developments. One, the above one is the green development, which was a thorough eco-restoration work by the local poor communities of continuous 10 villages in the 8,000 acre, that is approx around 4,000 hectare of continuous landscape areas. So when they did their development, it was very tuned with the nature, very self-sustained, which we will see further. And then the second development come on the name of clean development mechanism, a windmill intervention, where what happened we will see next time. So this is the Kalpavali area, say 25-30 years ago, absolutely barren. And then with lots of community intervention, collective efforts, mutual efforts, they worked on this area. All these are some activities of them, like the continuous area, the whole landscape was treated for soil and water conservation. This kind of community works with children, women, elders. They do very regular seasonal plantation and seed building activities to increase the forest cover. Now this is the Kalpavali area. After all this eco-restoration work, all the hard works, all the valleys become dense, the green hills, streams become healthy, and I should mention that this stream was absolutely dry 30-40 years ago, and because of this work, this stream, this river started flowing. These are the paddy fields, rice fields, and this whole area has very different kinds of rolling grasslands, has more than 120 kind of fodder species for the animals here. So the sacred groves also enhanced, and altogether this area has provided the dish with more than 500 flora and fauna species. When this community started, they started with 31 species only. But now what happened? This clean development mechanism project came here and became a green disaster. This was the area earlier, and then now if you go there, everywhere you will find all our huge towers of windmills. Now what is clean development mechanism? And these are the three major agenda of CDM projects, that to reduce emission, to contribute in carbon sequestration, and to use this carbon efficiency fund for development projects. Now we will keep in mind in our this whole discussion that are these three criteria are fulfilled in the next coming slides or not. Now this white boundary is the Kalpavali conserved area, and the orange lines and the areas are the windmill areas. And these are all the spots of windmills in these areas. So how this project was implemented, you can see, and all these roads which are made here on a contour line with a very huge areas illegally encroached, forcefully encroached, as there was no any permission for road construction. This person is standing, Gopal Swami, his height is 6 feet, and you can see what area is, what the landmass is cut at the contour line. The area is continuously now facing soil erosion, landsliding. Like this, these roads are, for last 3-4 years, all these roads are cutting and going with the rainwater towards the village camps. These are all the negative impacts on the vegetation we can see. The animal death is a very severe problem here. Within the implementation of this project, in 2 years, 180 cows died because one when they fallen in the very deep trench dug by the company, and second, the plastic thrown away everywhere. So now the question is, who can be the best option for carbon sequestration? Are the green trees or these towers? in a wind speed time for 3 months or maximum 3.5 months in India. Then we already read that they were the agenda of CDM projects. Now you can see, are they fulfilled here? What about the pollution? What about the employment? Because it's a high-tech projects. The local youth, the local people who do not have engineering degrees and all, they do not get employment in this kind of projects. So this kind of project do not give any employment in the local area other than the landless people who do the digging work. Then benefit, companies get huge benefits, but the local communities, they do not get any kind of benefit. And then the carbon emission, then you yourself can calculate that one tower which height is 75 meters and has 500 metric ton of weight, has tremendous and very executive type of concrete and steel used. So you can consider, you can understand that what kind of emission happened when those materials were carried out to make the windmill body. And then, is it clean development or it is just a capital development projects? When this project was implemented on the ground in Kalpavali, all this kind of violation was happened, and it is still happening. All the acts and laws which are existing in India, in the state of Andhra Pradesh, they were violated. The basic Indian Constitution, Article 21, which says that each and every Indian has right to live life, that also violated. Then there is a contempt of Supreme Court of India, which clearly says that any forest areas cannot be taken for this kind of project, but you have seen yourself that which kind of area it was. And then of course India has signed many international policies and protocols to conserve biodiversity, to protect and conserve the traditional communities' rights, that also violated. Of course we tried a lot, because this is what we found, that this is need to do at national level, like India level. We tried a lot, all these things, but in India, like in European countries, environmental impact assessment for windmill projects may be mandatory, but India it is not mandatory. This is a very fault thing in India, very bad thing in India, and we are fighting for this. So of course all these acts violated and what we are doing is going on. And then there is no participation of community, there is no involvement of community, there was very fake kind of stakeholder consultation done at local level when they wanted to start their project. And there was no any consideration from the local community to give their any kind of comment or views in these projects. And of course at international level, as I already said, that India has signed many international policies and protocols. When we see the UNCBD, the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, which always says we have to conserve biodiversity, we have to conserve local communities, we have to protect our native communities. But then at the second hand of the United Nations, which is United Nations Framework for Convention on Climate Change, has only business orientation, has only the capital, only view of carbon credit market. And that second hand of UN doesn't have any concern when this kind of companies, when put file to them for carbon registration, which kind of violation, which kind of environmental destruction, which kind of livelihood destruction, or which kind of society level destruction happened in those host countries. They don't see that. And what we feel that the international pressure can only help to do this. Because this is not only case of India. When we studied, we found that this kind of cases are across the globe. And we are keep saying to UNFCCC that this kind of project must be evaluated very honestly, very transparently, and when this kind of violations are there, even all those violations which I mentioned, they are mentioned by UNFCCC also, that this kind of violations are there, then the project will not get carbon credit. But we submitted all the proof, all the report, but the project got carbon credit.
Thank you for this powerful and concise narrative. But just to understand this a little better, can you spend a minute telling us how this is actually solved in India? I mean, what benefits are shown? Are there engineers shipped in to live there? Is energy prices cheaper? How is this portrayed as good on the ground?
Any other?
Yeah, oh, good. So, we just got back from the one official opening of the United Nations Sustainable Energy for All Decade. And in this grand presentation, India and Indian organizations played a major role. So it's all about triggering hundreds of billions of public-private partnerships for what you call clean development. Access to clean energies, energy efficiency programs, very much top-down, a lot of money, a lot of stakeholders, a lot of profits to be made. Were organizations like you involved at any time in what India presented to the world at the United Nations as being a major part of all that?
Okay, last one.
I would say mine is partly in continuation with that. Just to let you know, I have spent a couple of months myself at UNFCCC. I'm in another organization for stadium and also I'm into the environmental assessment of energy technology. So this is what basically concerns me as well. But you highlighted for example, the role played by CDM in this, and also probably to a certain extent windmills as a technology, and also to a certain extent project development. But as he was pointing out, in CDM, if I understand properly, they leave the environmental assessment part to the nations. I mean, there is some organizations which are in charge, taken by the government of India. They have to sign or make an agreement to say that this project has not violated the environmental regulations. This clearly shows that this project, I would say it's easy to blame others, This project has happened, it's very pity, there is no doubt in that, but this project has happened due to the mistakes of Indian establishment and government. So I would say it's true, we are existing in a mixed society, everything is very slow. But I should say we should highlight the roles played by the local bodies and the government and the local organizations, how they are working and stuff. So I would say this would be center focus. If they are really tight and they don't allow, nobody can come and exploit.
Okay. I will answer this question first, because what you say, if you even yourself go on UNFCCC website, there is this PDD, project design document of this project is there. When they filed that file for carbon credit registration, right? There itself they have mentioned that the host country approval is yet to be get. Is not yet collected. Okay. We mentioned that to UNFCCC Secretariat that in this particular file, plot number E, F, G, what it says. On the F side, it is clearly said that host country approval is not there. So, and then you say that when this is not there, they will not proceed further, isn't it?
Alright, so I assume the government of India, and I would say they should intervene. Yeah, they have right to intervene because, and also I would say it's the responsibility of the government because we are being looted. For example, in this case, looted. We should take the responsibility, not then you will have to say which is in government. So we are totally outside.
The thing is, when we mentioned that to UNFCCC Secretariat that this company has not still the host country approval. We sent this whole report with our government and all the proof. They did not consider. Who? UNFCCC. They did not consider, although they in fact credit. They gave the credit to this company. And this file is still there on UNFCCC website. 3 persons of us, one from Brazil, even of his Moser and 2 from India. We 3 persons were there who sent our comment report to UNFCCC Secretariat that this company doesn't have host country approval. But still UNFCCC gave final green seal. And yes, this one, that in India, unfortunately we have different states in India have little different dilemma, but in this area is quite arid in Andhra Pradesh state in India, and in Andhra Pradesh there is 80% tax benefit to those projects who are considered clean energy projects. And in Andhra Pradesh there are huge areas still who have quite high wind speed areas. And because of this tax benefit, these companies are getting, quite easy get in to these areas. And second thing, of course, with full guarantee, I say there is a big corruption. Otherwise, our government can save everything, but there is a huge corruption. And because of that, even I said that there is a contempt to the Supreme Court of India that this kind of areas cannot be given for this kind of intervention. But it happened. So we are saying that we are not blaming to only UNFCCC or to this company, and this company is Enercon company. So there are, our blame is on Indian government also. And then,
energy that the India government is presenting.
Yes. You said that when UNFCCC or this UN sustainable energy, when they made all this kind of policies and when, then I will tell you, even a small example, then there is a FICCI organization, FICCI.
Federation of Indian Industry.
Exactly. And this FICCI represents who?
Big industry.
Big industries. There are no local communities. So people who are sitting in this FICCI, they give their direct comments, views to this, who is this international authority. People who are sitting in villages, even people who are like us in NGOs, they do not know even when the call came to give our views. We do not know. So this industrialists, they give their views to them that okay, we can do this project like this, we can get land like this. So that's why the local community is absent everywhere in international policy making.
Can you say a little bit about how this kind of windmill is a very big illustration of an anti-degrowth approach even to renewable energy? There are windmills and there are windmills. This particular model is particularly destructive.
Yes.
Because it is centralized and it is aimed at feeding energy into a large centralized grid. So that's a very important part of the problem here. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a big business model, feeding the grid.
Let me now reveal few things. That this community were 4 years ago were totally disagree, to allow this company to enter into their area. So this company made some promises to the local community that, and I can show the TOR also, the memorandum of understanding, MOU and TOR, but it's very sensitive. I can show you here all those 4 points, 4 promises made by company and violated by company. Their one promise was, you allow us to enter, we will provide employment. Second was, we will only construct 3-meter width of road. Only 3-meter width of road. And if you see all these photographs, there are more than 15-meter width of roads in the area. So when they did that, so when they made actually the promises, community didn't realize that what big level of destruction will happen. So when they did that, and they also said that there will not be a big destruction. You see, you have Ramgiri area. So let me tell that this Kalpavali area has very attached with a Ramagiri, another windmill area, wind farm area, which is around 29 years old wind farm area. But in that wind farm area, there are a lattice structure. fan structure is like maybe 20-meter height, 30-meter height. I mean the old windmill structures. And they were not consuming that much cement and water and big areas like that. They were not that much heavy. Like this one windmill has weight of 500 metric ton, which is said by the same company, because they made this tower has some signboards that what weight there, what height there. So now when people saw that okay, Ramgiri, when those windmills came, there was no big destruction, so they allowed. But when these people started all these big things, so then that time they started doing, protest kind of thing, saying no, this is wrong. But then by that time, it was everything out of their hand, because when they started construction of the big roads, and when community approached them, they didn't listen them. Just say get lost. Then community went to the local administrator, the collector, magistrate of the district. He didn't help. Then the forest officers, they didn't help. The MLAs, the local political leaders, they didn't help. The state environment minister didn't help. Even the central environment minister didn't help. And finally the area had to face the whole destruction. And why this windmill, this model, why it has a big problem? Because see the 500 metric ton weight when it stands and when it is just a dead weight. When the fan is not working, that time it is 500 metric ton. But when the fan is working, that time it increases weight because there is a gravity force also. And for 500 metric ton weight windmill, when you have to erect on some hill, you should know how much area it requires. So here one windmill required half hectare of area on hill. So this is the hill. So just on the top you can't erect windmill because 500 metric ton weight required even a very deep foundation also. So they cut these hills like this, and all the landmass which cut, they everything thrown on their own convenience. So thrown here, thrown there, and all they were on valley areas, completely blocked. Now the river is not flowing like earlier it was flowing. All the water channels are blocked. So water is not coming to the village tank, and whatever water is coming to the village tanks, it is coming with lot of mud. Because all the roads you see here, there is no safety measure applied at all. So every season this area is getting this landsliding, soil erosion, and everything is going to the tank, and there is a big problem with heavy siltation in the tank. The water holding capacity of the tank is now decreasing a lot. So you can understand, like, if this kind of windmills are erected in such kind of highly watershed supporting area, is it good? This is not a simple plain area. It's a very hilly terrain. It's a watershed area.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and we wanted to give time to this because there's this international dimension. But of course, like we know, infrastructure development can be done in a very destructive way or only mildly disturbing way, and of course the main actors are there on the ground. But then when like in this case, you're a German, well-reputed company, and we've been having very positive image globally, and then the UNFC, the people see giving a stamp that this is clean, then it makes the actions on the ground of the local communities much harder, and that there's this sort of global green approval for this, even if it's done in the worst possible way on the ground. So thanks again. And now we move on to another quite different perspective. Bhuvan Pathak is from Uttarakhand, from the Himalayan state of India, and he's been active in various movements for I would say all his life. But the angle he takes today is that with the regulation of the political parties, that our question is that what is the role and what are the difficulties and opportunities in this transformation with established political parties that recently has joined the ruling party over there, the Congress Party, which has been around since decades or from the centuries actually. And that what are the dilemmas for him being an environmentalist, radical Democrat, and so on to engage in a mainstream political party.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you all. It's really difficult what Marco told me to talk about. Actually, by practice, I am not an environmentalist, neither a political worker, but I spent my 20 years as an activist in Himalaya and in different parts of India. Meanwhile, I was a bit connected with the politics, and then I decided a few months back to be a seasoned political worker, because I think that being as an activist, the question came into my mind, and what I learned from my struggles, what dilemmas I feel inside me, I want to translate these all dilemmas in a political lens. Because I find that all the major decisions were taken by the politicians, by the system. But as an activist in India, I have a very limited approach to the political parties. And the space inside the political parties to listen voice like me is a very, very minimum. And so yesterday I was telling Marco, I am a very marginal political worker inside my political party, because what kind of a question I raise, they are not fit in that system. But okay, that is another thing. Here, I am really thankful to you all, young people who gathered here for this fantastic workshop, and I listened so many new ideas, new visions, new thoughts during last 3.5 days. And the fantastic presentation by my sister Lina earlier. I want to take you to another side of my world. I came from a different worldview. I came from a different part of world where the belief system is different, where the decision process is different. I will start with a story. It's a very nice story which my mother told me when I was very young. My mother told that about 45 years back, in beginning of 70s, when we were very new to the modern growth, and when we were very new to growth, and we were living like a pre-growth era. Then it's about when there was a green revolution was started in India. In my village, the few experts from agriculture department came, and they started teaching my mother, not only my whole village community, how to improve the agriculture, how to modernize the agriculture system, how to use the new and modern technologies. And they start, and my mother told the first day when they came to my mother's field, all the women who were working in the field, they left the field. They ran away from the field, because the newcomer came into their field. But slowly they trained my mother, not my mother is a symbol of a woman in Himalayan trains. They trained all the women or the men or the farmers in Himalayan region how to agriculture with the new knowledge, with the new system, with the new technology. But after 30 or 40 years back, the same person came with a different face, with a different identity, and they told that what you people are doing, you are spoiling land, you are using fertilizers, you are using motorized machines, you are using such and such thing. You shouldn't do this. You should go back. You should go to that. You should start organic farming. You should use the traditional knowledge. You should use the traditional seeds. What is this? This made my mother confused. It means this made my community confused. What to do? In the last 40 years, you people trained me in one direction, and suddenly you came and pull my hair and turn me like this, and you start again, you do this thing. So this whole confusion I can see in my society about growth. About the growth I can see around me, inside me also. I am in dilemma because I don't use only total growth. I use also so many small things and small examples which are actually what is called but they gives me a direction towards the post-growth society. I use this, but I have a different kind of. I am in a state of very confusion. What to do? Like energy. Energy is a big issue. Yesterday I was in the same hall. I was listening a deliberation about the technology. Okay, technology is a role. I don't say that technology doesn't have a role. Technology has a role. Technology gave me a chance to interact with you. Technology last 200, 150 years growth of technology, science and modern technology gave me a chance to come here and talk to you people. And you also gave chance to talk to me and to talk with the other world. But now, if we are thinking about this post-growth society, then what will be the role of technology? I ask myself, can I live without machine? I ask myself, can I live without motorized transport? I ask myself, can I live without using fossil energy? I ask myself, can I live without using new means of transportation and communication? If I can't live without all these machines, then what kind of a post-growth society I want to make? Yesterday someone told me that growth for third world, growth for poor and degrowth for rich. Is this possible? Someone told that. Even I think Mark also told me that this is your line of your political line, and I completely disagree with it. Because as a human being, because now we are not living in 17th century, we are not living in 16th century. Everyone has access to reach in any part of the world through virtually, through communication, through internet, through telephone, through media, everything. So, what kind of a post-growth society we want to make, and what the role of a human being, or the system, or the nation state, or the policies? That is a big question for me. And another thing, another important question for myself. I say I am using the fruit of modern growth. I am using, and conflict in my mind that how can I critique if I am using? If I say I will not use aeroplane, I will not fly, then how I will come to see you people and to share my views with you people? And this is a very political thing which always make me weaker, which it is called not only confused, but it only yeah, it made me scary. How can I critique? How can I critique a phone which is in a smartphone which is in my pocket? How can I critique a flight which I came up here? So these kind of a question I am engaged in myself, and I want to answer all these questions, and the answers will take me to the post-growth society. But one another thing, when I was listening so many things, so many deliberations, I heard so many speakers, young people, they were very much engaged with the idea of degrowth. And I see that, I saw in last 3.5 days that you are constructing the politics of degrowth. This is very good. It will definitely, it will come to my part of the world also. But in India, where I believe the people are still, the people are still, demanding for growth. Here, if an activist society is fighting for saving forest, rivers, land, we all people are fighting against MNCs, multinational corporations, we are fighting against the carbon emission companies, we are fighting against those laws who are snatching land and snatching rivers and snatching fishes from our hand, who are snatching river coastal area from a common people's hand. But meanwhile, thousands and millions of people are still fighting for uninterrupted water, uninterrupted electricity, clean air, road transportation, better health, better education, and it's not a small community. It's a huge population in third world. And do we have any idea about those people? Do we have any respect about those people? Because I saw a board. You can see there are some questions, and one very fine questions I read. I didn't answer it. The question was, someone asked in the board and asked to answer. Do the global south know how they have to pay for the development as we have in north? That one question. There are so many other questions. They are politically correct questions. But what the point I want to make, that if we want to go for any post-growth society, then we have to ask few questions to ourselves. We have to answer some philosophical questions which is regarding the human society. It's not only question of technology. It's not only question of machines. It's not only question of law and policy and time bank and other. But it's a question of total humanity. And the biggest question of to whom, the existence of whom, for whom we are going for the post-growth society. Is it for a human being? Is it for a mother earth? Is it for an individual, or is it for a community? As I see in last 30 years, I want to show you few examples. And I am a person of traditional, oral tradition, and it's very difficult for me to articulate myself in 5 minutes with a PowerPoint presentation. But I want to say you just one example in my area. Within last 30 years, we were using such. Before 30 years in my child age, I still remember, we were using such a fine use of gravity as an energy in the hills. Because I come from the hills, I come from the Himalaya. Most of our rural technology, what you say traditional technology, but I say it's a livelihood resources for us. We were using gravity as a biggest source of energy in my part of the world. But in last 30 or 40 years, because of the influence of modern machines, modern technology, or modern growth, we lost that technology. We completely is demolished now. It's a very little science over here and there. New generation like my son and more younger people, they are not well aware and well familiar to that technology. And this didn't happen in only my part. It happened in your part also, in other parts, in the small communities. So can we gather these examples which can show us a light or a path for the post-growth society? This is my submission to Marco. It's not only political debate, but it's a collection of some few good things, and to look around the global community, to look around those people who have still that kind of wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening to me, Marco. I think
so any immediate question, reaction? Yeah.
Just a question, because you were saying that people in India are still demanding. So you were saying that people in India are still demanding growth. And I understand it, but I think they are very different kinds of growth. And the kind of growth that is, I think it's also sold to them as images, as ideas of good life maybe as well. But I think doing that, like feeding into that kind of discourse that maybe development will offer people a better life, which will not happen. And in India it is also seen, because India has seen growth rate, the GDP growth rates of 8-9% in the last decade. But it has not reached the poorest of the poor. I mean, and also the windmill farm, it does not reach the the people who are actually in need of energy. It reaches the big grids, and it reaches the middle class, which is constantly growing in countries like India and in China. You can find multiple examples that show the very same picture. And I think actually it would require a global fed discourse of what we may understand by development. How do we reach a good life for everyone? Not one good life, but how can we reach good life forms that might be totally different? They have to look very different all over the world. But every human being should have a right to their form of right livelihood that they expect for them in harmony with the local environment.
Thanks. Some others? Just wanted to add to that, saying that in Goa, you speak to people, and of course you're from a local community yourself. I don't see them demanding growth.
Seems to me that people, if you ask a single sentence, do you want development? Yeah, most people will say yes. But you go beyond that and say why? What is it that you need? People are then talking about adequate food, water, livelihoods, jobs, housing, etc. So it's not growth that is being demanded. It's actually basic needs and beyond, which is what is being asked for and demanded. Now, if you then deconstruct that, then to say that is growth in the current form actually going to provide that, which is I think the point that you're making, or are there other ways in which these things can be provided without relying on the current model of economic growth? That is the crucial discussion that has to take place. Not simply, if you do a referendum in India or anywhere in the world saying we want development, I guess 80-90% people will say yes. But if you deconstruct it, it becomes very different.
Yes, Ashish, I totally agree with you and with you also. In very beginning I told that I am not going to give any deliberation. I am trying to, I tried to put so many questions in front of you. But as you told about the development and as Ashish told that, actually let us think about the growth. What is the growth? Growth has a very positive value. It doesn't have a negative value in common wisdom. Everybody thinks that growth is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Actually, if then we classify, okay, this is the modern growth, this is the pre-modern growth, this is the post-modern growth, this is the modern post-modern growth. Then it doesn't mean. But growth as a word, growth as a meaning, is a very, very positive thing. With the development, the word is as a word is a very good thing. The meaning is also good thing. That is our very classical mind and political definitions would define what is development. As deconstruction, I am agree with Ashish 100%. I do this practice among as an activist, as a political worker. That's why I am a marginal political worker, because I deconstruct the idea of development in front of my party worker, in front of my party leaders, that this is the development, what you are talking about, what you are distributing about. That's why I told in very beginning. But what I told that the aspiration of a common man. Otherwise we have to understand thousand million people about what we are talking about development, what you are talking about the development and all. But what I want to say that this development means, this growth means a aspiration of a good life in a common man. If suppose we just erase the idea of capitalism, idea of modern technology, idea of power behind the growth, idea of political power or money power or so many powers behind the growth, then if we establish a real growth, if we establish a true development among the human society, then it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing at all. So what I am trying to make that let us think about in that direction. So if sometime God will provide us more time to discuss this, then we will discuss it. Thank you. I am not very much clear in my mind, but a lot of questions for
you. Okay, now the next speaker is Pawan Gupta from the same area, which let's say working there for a few decades, and he has been engaged educational activities and is well read of Gandhi. And I think now towards the end we try to again become more general and focused on this idea of like how do we get to the direction, because I think the direction by and large, there's a lot of commonalities, and then what would be really helpful is to think of ways that how we move on. So far would be helpful.
Good evening, friends. It's difficult for me. Firstly, I have no solutions. And secondly, I am afflicted with a disease, the cure of which I am going to talk about. And to speak in a language which one is not really comfortable with, I can speak, as you can see. But to express complex thoughts has always been difficult for me in a language other than my own. But I'll try. I started my work about 26 years ago, and this was in the Himalayas. I started with schools at the demand of the villagers in that area. And after a few years of working, maybe a year or two, the elderly women of the village, and even men, but mostly women, who were above 50, 55, when they became friends with us, they started saying that you are ruining our children through this education. After getting educated, within quotes, they start feeling they are some kind of a superior being, and they start looking down upon us as inferior, looking down upon their parents and grandparents who are actually feeding them with their own labor. And they said they are neither here nor there. So we, in the beginning, of course, coming from an urban, middle-class background, slightly English educated, we only heard them, we did not listen to them. But after a point of time, one started noticing that what these women were saying was true. And one didn't know what to do. Should we close down our schools? Should we just stop doing what we were doing? And we said, no, that's not the way. But we didn't know what to do. We were in this is a conflict, a dilemma. About that time, someone, a person I consider my guru, he asked me a very simple question, said, have you read Mahatma Gandhi? Had he asked me, had the question been posed as, do you know Mahatma Gandhi? I would have said yes. But he asked me a very pointed question, a very simple question, have you read Mahatma Gandhi? Not about Mahatma Gandhi, but Mahatma Gandhi himself. And I had to think, and I said, no, not really. I have read his quotes, but I have not read him. So he persuaded me to buy the entire collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, 100 volumes in English and 100 volumes in Hindi, because he said, don't read translations. Translations are never good. Read the original stuff. So what he has spoken in Hindi, read in Hindi. If spoken in English, then read in English. And he suggested that I read him between 1915 and 1926, 28, that period, because that is the time when he's really speaking without having to make any kind of compromise, without having to think what his colleagues in Congress and outside Congress will think. So he says what he has to say. And one thing that I realized after reading him was, I understood my problem in the field, what these women were saying. Because Mahatma Gandhi said, this education, and it's true even now, this so-called education has alienated us. The distance between our school and our homes have become wider with this education. So we speak a different language in the school and in international forums. I'm really disturbed about the fact that we don't have any translation from a language from the southern countries in this international conference. It's never been. So I've been to 2 or 3 and I've never found, and no one being even apologizing about it. I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just saying that we need to be a little more sensitive. Because then, you know, the kind of world that we come from, the worldview seems to be different. Of course, we are all corrupted. Like I said in the beginning, that we are afflicted with the disease. So we have become corrupted, but still there are some elements still there, which can only come out when you can speak in our language. So Mahatma Gandhi says the school and homes have become very far apart. They've got alienated from each other. We speak a different language in school, different language at home. We wear different kind of clothes in school. We wear different kind of clothes at home. We sit in a different way in the school. We sit in a different way in school. Everything is different. And psychologically, this has an impact on the school-going children because they start feeling they are inferior. They are not good enough. Because their homes is so different from what is being taught. The cultural values which the school represents is so very different from the cultural values of home, and psychologically the child has already accepted the fact, whether he is good in studies or not good in studies, that school is superior. So this creates a kind of a deep scar in the psyche which I think people from the West will have a hard time understanding what it does to people like us who come from a colonized country, what damage it has done to us psychologically. We are always apologetic. We are always diffident. We are always self-conscious. And we try to cover it up with different things, with language, with mannerisms, stuff like that. Having said that, when I started reading Mahatma Gandhi, what I have understood, I'd like to share that with you. And I would encourage my friends here that you should at least read one book of his, which is Hind Swaraj, in which he has deconstructed and critiqued modernity. He calls it modernity. You call it growth. I still feel modernity is a better word. Like Bhuvan said just before me, that growth, at least in our civilization, vriddhi, growth, is a good word. Plants grow, trees grow. So growth is a good word. And when I was reading Mahatma Gandhi, I started looking at the word growth. And I started looking at the word development. He has never ever used these two words without a prefix. It is going, if he uses development, he prefixes it by saying physical development, spiritual development, economic development, like that. But never development as a stand-alone, as an adjective all alone. He's not used it. Or a noun all alone. He has not used it. That is important. Because today, this word, development more than growth, has got imprinted on all the minds, even in those communities that I work. In 25 years, I see there's a sea change. Children who went to school no longer want to do farming. They all want to drive taxis or get a government job. That's their aspiration. Because taxi is a machine.